Daniel, to the UKBC Budgie Club, where budgies come first. You're obviously well known throughout the show scene for world-renowned birds, winning many shows. But we do have a lot of members that information that they don't even realise they need comes about from interviews like this. A little bit all about feeding or housing birds in sheds and things. Really stuff that we may take as basic information, but the knowledge out there there's a thirst for it. And the UKBC are hopefully going to fill these gaps with many interviews like yourself and other breeders. My next interview might be somebody who keeps an aviary and just breeds a few birds for fun. So we do, as a UKBC, we do cover the whole hobby, and we always put the birds first. So if we go straight into the questions, first one I've got here, and these are all come from members in a way. Some of them are a little bit tweaked, but the basis is there. So when and how did you start the hobby and bird keeping, and what made the budgie appeal to you above all others?
I started when I was 10 years old. A friend of mine, he had a couple as a pair of budgies, and he lost a little bit interest, and so they came more and more in our house. And I was getting fascinated, but my parents did not allow me to have birds. My mother was not very eager for any animals. Then I went to her goddaughter. Is that correct? Goddaughter?
Yes, goddaughter. Yeah.
Which is a cousin of mine, and they have a very good relationship. I was 10 and she was 20 or 21. And I spent there 1 week, and after 1 week, they told me, because I made it so good with them, I can get any present I would like. And I said, well, what I really would like would be a budgie cage. And they say, well, is it okay for your parents? I said, yeah, I think so. So we were driving into a shopping center, it was, and there I saw a bird, and they bought it, and I was very happy. And I came home, and they said, oh, he's very lonesome. So the next day we went there again, and we bought another one. And the day after, I went back home by train, and I still see the face of my mother. She collected me from Baden station, and I came out with the huge cage, and she saw me and said, hello. And then she was, oh, what's that? And she was not very happy, but because it was a present of her goddaughter, she couldn't refuse.
No.
And, I took it back home, and after I said, I'm not sure whether it's a cock and a hen, and I have to find it out. So I put a shoe cartoon on the top of the window, and they went quickly in there, and
you had a cock and a hen then.
And, a few weeks later, they start to breed, to lay eggs, and I didn't tell anything to my parents. And I did not want it to open the window anymore. Because I was afraid to fly out. And once my mother said, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Well, they started to lay eggs." And said, "Oh, you have to kick them away." And they said, "No, we wait." And then after 2-3 weeks, they started to beep 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 beep. And for me, it was a miracle. And that was the beginning. And I always was fascinated by any kind of birds. When I was younger, I also wanted to become a pilot or an astronaut. And but then I realized it's a complete wrong profession for me, because I don't like flying, I'm afraid.
Oh, right. Yeah, that doesn't help.
No, not at all. And you're always not at home, and I didn't want that. But anything that is able to fly was fascinating. And so I kept the next few years, I had more and more birds. And my father built me an aviary in the garden. And I kept there Burgsittich, Pennant, Nymphensittich, Prachtrosella. I don't know the English names, all of them.
Yeah, I recognize some of the Rosella and things,
Rosella, things like this. But from the behavior, I realized budgie is what I mostly like. But in the first few years, I only had the small ones.
Yeah,
And I always, when I had 20, 30 Swiss francs, I went to a shop and bought a new color. And
brilliant.
I really loved it because, yeah, I was fascinated to see. I had no idea about the rules of breeding, about the colors, but I saw, okay, that happens. And then the first bird I bought was a dark green, and his partner was a dark blue, and they bred a red eye, a Lutino. For me, it was like a miracle. How is that possible from these two birds?
Yeah,
I had no idea that a bird can be split and things like this. But I did learning by doing, and well, I speak much too much. Like this, we will never end the.
no, that's okay.
But
It's
I realized that the budgies, the behavior of the budgies is what I really like. They are curious. They are always, there's always something going on. They're interested. They are
yeah,
not mean. They are friendly. Well, not all the time. Hens can be very nasty. But so I was breeding different birds. And but what I was most interested in the behavior of budgies, and then I got more and more specialized by budgies, and I start. There was a breeder in the same village where we live, and I bought for 60 Swiss franc. I still know that, or 55. That was very expensive for me. I bought
right.
I bought an English standard bird, or they say English budgie, and I brought him back home, and he looked so much different to the ones I have, and I asked him a few days later whether I can give him back. I don't like him. And he said, no, you can't. But he let me have a hen for him for free. That
Right.
feed them and so on. And I said, oh, I didn't like them. And then suddenly, in a few, I don't know, a few days in my head, it changed. Before I didn't like the big ones. And then suddenly I only liked the big ones. And yeah, and then I still kept the small ones, and then I started with the big ones, and then I realized with the big ones, it's the only bird where you breed not just numbers, where you go for certain features.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
always interested in art and in design. I always look when there's a new car coming out. I look at the design of the car, even if I'm not at all interested in cars. It's just about the design, or the design of a mobile. Somebody
yeah,
has to design it, and I mean nowadays they all look the same. But the guy who made the design for the iPhone, I mean that's. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's perfectly well done and looks nice, and every kind of design. That's also someone had to design that, and
yeah,
it's great work. And I thought, well, with budgies, I wanted to also, when I was 15, 16, I thought, well, I want to design budgies.
yeah. No, and I think that is it. You're an artist
That's,
with the breeding,
that's
aren't
what
you?
I still do since 42
Yeah,
years now. I
yeah.
started 42 years old. Now,
So so when you sort of decided that okay, you wanted to do the show budgies, who was the influence? Who I know you say you sort of realized you liked them, but who influenced you in how you would go about breeding your ideal budgie?
well, in the first few years, I spent all the money I had in Swiss breeders, and most of them let me down. They sold me old birds that didn't breed, and I was disappointed. And then I met Heinrich Ott, my old mentor. He's now next month, I think, 84 years, 85 or 84, I'm not sure. But we still have contact. Now, in the last 1.5 years, we only saw each other once because he was very afraid of the COVID. But
Yeah,
we still see each other 2, 3, 4 times a year and talk about Bocci. He had to give up because of health problems. He had a
right.
problem with his lungs, and
All right.
he left them. But he, I, at the beginning, I thought he was unfriendly, and And I was afraid. He was big name in Switzerland, and I was a small breeder. I was 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah.
I think 16. And I still remember there was a pied, dominant pied cinnamon dark green hen. She was in the 5th class, and she was for sale in the champion section. And she was 70, 75 Swiss francs. It was written. And the whole day I was thinking, oh, I would like to buy that hen. And then a few minutes before the show was closed, I started to talk with him. And he said, I don't have time now. He had the whole afternoon. He realized that I was looking at him, but I was too shy. You had the whole day time to talk with me. Now it's too late. Okay.
Oh
And
dear.
later he said, you find my phone number in the catalog. You can call me. I said, okay. So a few days later, I called him, and I went to visit him, and he sold me the hen. She was already 4 years old, and she bred for me a few chicks. Then she died. But he was very supporting me, and
Yeah.
he told me, look, Daniel, these are my best pairs up here, and these are the worst chicks from those pairs. That's what you can buy. And I thought, well, that's disappointing. That doesn't help me.
No.
But he said, breed with them and you will see. And I bought them because, yeah, and I realized that a bird, also if he's poor looking with the strong pedigree, he can breed much, much better birds than he looks like. And
I
that's
think
my
I think a lot of I think a lot of beginners or novices now in this country, they want to buy the best visual every time, and
everybody.
yeah. And I think the mentor side of things in the hobby is very, it's not really there. There's no mentors to bring and help beginners through. It is slowly changing, but yeah. So obviously we know you're linked with the word exhibition budgie, and everybody thinks of yourself. So what keeps you going year on year? Just the ability to breed birds, or
Well, it's I still think I can change the birds, and I'm a little bit tired of. I have very good cinnamon gray greens, cinnamon grays, and normal grays, and gray greens, and in the last few years I started a little bit with funny colors, clear
yeah,
greens, melanistic spangles, and I want to breed dark factors, violets, spangles with double factor golden face. I want to
lovely.
play with colors, and yeah, it's you always go closer to the ideal bird. And I still like my birds nowadays more than I liked them 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I changed them a lot, and I still want to make them a little bit smaller, and I want the birds to get back able to fly all the start. I'm not there yet, but I would
Yeah,
say 60-70% of my breeding birds, they fly, and they can easily not just down,
yeah.
so they can up.
And has that just come from the selective breeding? You've just chosen the partners sensibly.
Of course, I mean, there are two main important stages of breeding budgies. One stage is no free. First, what you buy, where you buy your birds from, and then secondly, how you pair the birds together. And then the third station, how you got youngsters. You have a breeding pair, they breed you 14 chicks in 3 rounds. And so now you have to make a selection. It doesn't make sense to keep them all.
No.
And let's take the feature big spots. If you keep from every pair for a long time, always the birds with the big spots, after 5 years, you will see, okay, in that stud there's a lot of big spots, for example. Or the feature I was eager for already when I was a little bit more than 20 was the directional feathering.
Yeah,
I realized most birds, the feather were going like this, And the Manus birds, the feather were going like this. And I thought, well, I would like to have the feather going like this. And whenever I saw a bird like this, I tried to get it. And I remember I bred myself a cinnamon opal in gray-green hen that already had this. And I realized this bird looks different to the other ones. And I tried to get as many youngsters from that hen. And I went on with many of them. And some of them had this feature again, the directional feathering.
Yeah.
So when you try to fix that after many generations, it's there. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we've sort of touched on this a little bit as we've been going through the first part, but if you were to start again, what advice would you give yourself now knowing the information you have from your experience?
Oh, I made a lot of thoughts, but I think these thoughts you have to make. At the beginning, I went there and there and there, and I bought this bird and this bird and this bird, and I mixed them all together, and I was not very successful. I mean, I really started to go up to the top after I get in contact with Heinrich Ott. Heinrich
Yeah.
Ott was going regularly in his younger years to the UK. He had birds from mainly from Doc Sadler and some Moffat birds and Sadler, and what was the other name? Sadler and
Probably before my time in the hobby.
yeah, wait, everybody will know, not Pilkington. Sadler. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Well, it was before my time as well. Doc Sadler,
Yeah.
I met when he was an old man and I was a young man in '96. I
Yeah.
was driving with the bicycle through UK, and I went to visit him. I went to visit different breeders in '96, but at that time I already had really good birds.
Ah.
And I forgot the question. What did you ask?
No, sort of what mistakes you've made and what you would tell yourself now to do, and like you said, you wouldn't buy from everywhere, would you?
Ah, sorry, I forgot. Well, find a local breeder that you feel confident with, and try to keep in contact with him. And you have to, I think, you should take the decision. Okay, that's the guy I want to work with. And if you get disappointed, yeah,
Move on to the next one, sort of thing.
the next one. But
Yeah.
I think it's wrong to buy there a bird and there a bird and there a bird, and to mix them all together. It's difficult. At the beginning, you have to get a bloodline, and I don't make lots of inbreeding, but I still stay in the line somehow.
Yeah.
And if you mix everything, you get often in trouble also with French mold issues. If you buy too many birds from too many different studs, you get French mold from those birds, but that has not much to do with the birds. That's just the fact that many birds come
Yeah.
together from different studs with different bacteria, with different viruses, and that can cause problem.
Yeah. So I'm told you have a love of football as well. So how do you manage it all, and do you have any help in the bird room?
I have a group of people that I'm very happy with. Some are budgie breeders, some they have no idea about budgies, but I show them what they need to do, and they write down the hours what they work. I mainly when I'd go 3-4 days in the mountains for skiing, or the last week we were 10 days in the mountains.
Yeah.
So I can write them who's around, and some of them they have a key, and also two budgie breeders, they have a key, and they can come in my bird room anytime. And if the people that look after the bird who doesn't know what's going wrong, they see a bird is ill and I'm 5 hours away in the mountains or in Italy with the family of my wife or whatever, they know they can call them, and they those
Yeah.
other friends can come and have a look. And it's all about trust.
Yeah.
But those guys, they know it doesn't make sense to steal eggs or youngsters or whatever, because they can get any of my birds after breeding. In the
Yeah.
main season, I breed with my best birds, but after that, I lend them to my friends and they can breed with him. Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's I think a reason why many people stop breeding after a few years is I've just spoken with a guy from Germany. I said, why did you stop? He said, well, for 10 years I had no more vacation, and yeah, I want to see something else from the world. And I think it's I you know, many people, they breed the whole year. I'm still breeding at the moment, but end of February I start.
Yeah.
Everything's organized. I will give babies and eggs away, and then 2 weeks later the boxes will be empty, and I will clean everything, and then the birds are on the big flights, and then I have a few months that are relaxing for me and for the birds,
Yeah.
and especially for the family. And that's very, very important. People that breeds the whole year for several years and never go away, I would get mad. I think
I think I would as well. Yeah. I think I
you
would.
have to make a break, and it's good for everyone, and not just for yourself, also for the birds, and especially for the family.
Yeah.
When I'm not breeding, I can make the birds in, yeah, 1.5 hours. My wife would say it's not true, but I could do very, very quick, just changing the water several times and morning, and give food and millet sprays, and then you can go. And I forgot, I have neighbors that also have the key, and they just go in to change the water in the flights. That's
Oh, that's
very.
good.
Now when I give the food in the morning, and they change 3-4 times a day the water,
Yeah.
so I can
Yeah,
easily.
because you use open bowls for your water, don't you? You use open bowls.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the birds are loving it, and in
Yeah.
summertime they love to take a bath, but
Yep.
they also like to shit in it. And I mean, if in summertime, if you have a ill bird, one single ill bird, and the other ones drink it, and
Yeah.
you leave the water too long, you have a few days later you have
Yeah.
50 sick birds, and that's dangerous. And that's why, yeah, water need to be changed. And I have people that I can tell, please do that, and they write down the hours. I mean, you know, when you change the water, it takes them 10 minutes, and for to change all the waters, and they go again, and they do it 5 days. It costs you
Yeah.
nothing, but it's extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I was going to just sort of move on to the birds now and sort of ask a few questions. And one that's come up is, what improvements would you like to see in your birds, and what are you working on at the moment? And I know you said, you want your birds to be able to fly.
Yeah.
So is there anything else? Have you, are you looking at changing the shape of the bird or anything else?
Well, if you want your birds to be able to fly again, you have to make them shorter, and the feather must become wider. And you see, when a bird has small spots, it's a big chance that he cannot fly. And all those big, heavy feathered birds that you see on Facebook, and everybody is writing super, super, mashallah, and most of those birds cannot fly anymore, and they don't breed anymore perfectly, and they don't lay lots of eggs, and many of them cannot mate themselves anymore, and things like this. I think I had them as well, but I left that way 10,
Yeah.
15 years ago. No, no, it's 10 years. My younger daughter was, my older daughter, she was a little child, and I went to visit a friend of mine who always gets the poor birds of mine. He just keeps them in a flight and breeds a little bit. And he said, Daddy, why these birds can fly much better than your ones? I said, well, because they're smaller. And she said, well, but your birds, they cannot fly really. And said, well, and she said, it's not correct. You birds must be able to fly. And I said, yeah, actually,
Yeah.
you're right. And I mean, it's a small gap between uh, able to fly and be a shitbird as a little ugly non-interesting bird. And I mean, if you would leave the birds for 10 years in a big flight, big huge flight, a big yeah, and you just let them breed, after you don't influence anything. After a few years you only would have the small ones because they are fit enough to fight, and yeah, the nature would go through. And what we are doing the whole day, the whole year, it's breeding somehow against nature.
Yeah.
And I think we, especially artificial insemination, I think, in my opinion, it's completely the wrong way. If you have a bird that cannot mate anymore naturally, then it's no point to get
What's
young.
the point? Yeah.
I know that many people don't see that like this, but I'm happy when I have a nest with 4 or 5 chicks, and I'm happy when I see them mating. And I still have lots of things that do not work the way I want, but I think I'm happy that I changed the way. And yeah, some people say my birds, oh, you see the sun is coming in.
Yeah, looks nice now.
Well, I close it again. And yeah, I'm sure I don't want to go back the road I've been. And I'm happy with the birds, how they are now. And I still want to get them shorter, more compact, and able to fly. That's for
Yeah.
me the main feature.
But are you still looking at this show head quality that you've been sort of,
Of
yeah,
course. But I also had birds some years ago that had too much feather along above the eyes, and I bred 10 years ago. I don't remember. I started with crests, and I had a crest. Everybody said that's the best crest in the world because he had the feathers all around. He had a perfect
yeah,
tuft, perfect crest.
crest?
Yeah, but the feathers were really, he couldn't see
Couldn't
anything.
see.
No,
Yeah,
I sold him, and I said, well, what? And many birds that have too much feathers, they really cannot see anymore. I also still have a few birds like this, and where I have to trim the eye, and I think it doesn't make sense to breed with them because it's too far. And it's the feathers that are going too close, and birds that are not able to fly because they have too much feather, it's the same. You must make the feather
yeah,
more shorter, smaller.
yeah. Okay, so what's your favourite variety at the moment that you're working on?
I would like to breed double factor spangles, violets, or double factor golden face. I mean, in most varieties, but I'm not very successful yet. They don't want like I do. I have now again a golden face cock with a golden face spangle hen, and the cock is split cinnamon, and I wanted to, and they both have dark factors, and I have 4 chicks from them, but not one is not even close the color I hoped to get. But
Right.
that's the part of it. I bred 2 birds, violet, yellow face, but they're not golden face, violet spangles this year so far. But I tried many combinations, so it's not
Yeah.
always
Because
going.
is it where the golden face, once you double factor the golden face, it stays in the face? It doesn't run into the body, does it?
And you got a deep,
Deep
beautiful
golden. Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah. Okay. So what influence did the South African birds have on your birds? And is that a bird you're now trying to breed away from? Or have they still got their uses for you?
The South African birds from Pat de Beer had a massive influence in my stud. In 2000, my mother died, and because of cancer. She was young, 62.
Oh,
And I wanted to do something else. And I went with a friend of mine for several weeks, traveling through the Southern Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, a little bit Namibia. And there I went to visit Reinhard Molketin. And from him, I also had birds. I brought in Lutinos and recessives, and they are still somehow in my birds. I did well with them. And he at that time a very good Lutino. And I know that was 3 years later, not in the first shipment. That was 2002. I went back 2 years later.
um,
And he at that time a very good Lutino. I asked, can I buy him? He said no, but you can buy his father. And his father was an absolutely crap bird and looked strange. And I said, that's the father. And I said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. So I bought that bird, and that bird produced long tails for me. He wasn't a long tail, he was just a crab bird, but he produced long tail birds. And they really, the tail was,
wow.
yeah. And but that made me interested. So I think a year later I went back and I was visiting different spots in South Africa, and I saw a lot of those long-tail birds. And I told myself that's interesting because obviously these birds or that bloodline, they were coming from Manikini, and they came originally from the UK. They were long flights and long tails.
Yeah,
I told myself, if you're able to manage that extra feather gene, not from the tail and the wings into the head feather, then it's good. And yeah, that's what I did. Then many years, and
yeah.
I
Are
still
you?
I still get that feature. And I don't like long tails. I don't like long flights, but they are somehow in the back of my birds. In 2005, that was just 2 weeks before our older daughter get born, I went to see Pat the Beer, and I bought 13 birds of her, and 6 or 7, I'm not sure anymore, of them did breed. Not many, just a few chicks, 2, 3, 1. But with all those chicks, I went on. I didn't sell anything, and those chicks bred well for me. And as I told before, they had a massive impact on my birds. And but if you don't control them, it's dangerous. It's
Yeah.
interesting to work with them, but if you're not carefully, they get ugly. And
Yeah. So, with you saying you want to make this bird slightly compact, more sort of compact and able to fly, do you think that South African blood will become less and less within your birds because of that long tail, or do you envision dipping back into that blood at all?
I didn't understand.
Where you say you want to change the bird to a shorter, more compact bird,
Yeah.
that with the South African birds breeding such long tails and things, do you think you're going to breed further and further away
Yeah,
from?
the South African birds, that was 2005, and I was able to get lots of chicks from them in the second generation that did well for me. And yeah, there were these huge birds coming from, and I sold them in the whole world, and they still, I can see the
Yeah,
bloodline still everywhere. But I also still, I don't breed now with long tails anymore. But
right.
every year I get, I don't know, 10, 15 birds with a long, it's not, I wouldn't call them long tail, but a bird with a tail that is too long, 1, 2 centimeter, a little bit,
Yep.
maybe like this, too long, but it's not, I don't like. So I sell them, even if they are excellent birds.
Yeah.
And they are very useful to work with. Without those birds, I would not be in the position where I am now. But
Yeah.
you have to handle it. It's like flackies.
Yeah.
I don't like flacked birds, but if you're able, or if you know how to handle them, it's very useful. If you have a spangle with no markings, put him to a flacked bird, and you will get a certain amount of birds that are having a better marking.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the long-tail birds. If you're able to manage this extra feather gene, then you will win. And all my rare varieties, I put all those birds in there, and that's why they be. I mean, my recessive heights nowadays, they are as good as anything, because already 25 years ago I started to put my best birds into the recessives, and nowadays they are as good as the normals.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So when you're setting up to breed your birds, obviously you say you don't breed all year round, but do you pluck the vents of all your birds or trim the vents before breeding?
Normally, yes. It's better for sure for the birds if you trim them.
Yeah.
Most of the time I trim, and if I'm stressed, I pluck them. But especially for the big buffy feathered birds, it's a stress because they have to reproduce all the feathers. But it's not a guarantee. I think it's helpful for fertility, but sometimes I forgot and all the eggs are fertile, and sometimes I pluck and all the eggs are clear.
Yeah.
So, but I would say it's helpful.
Yeah. Okay. How often do you bring in an outcross?
Every year.
Yep.
I try to bring in birds every year because I think it's important that you do that. I remember when I was young, especially when I was visiting breeders in the UK, they told me, that's pure my bloodline. Since 10 years or since 20 years, I didn't bring a foreign bird in. And they were very proud. And I think they're very stupid because it doesn't make sense.
No.
And I also don't breed close. I don't pair cousin to cousin or father to daughter or half brother to half sister, things like this. It's like in human beings, we're not allowed to have
Close relationships.
close relation because I made that when I was young. I made a lot of experience, and I realized if you want to multiply, if you want to fix any feature and you stay close, you fix it very quick, but you multiply all the good features
And the bad, I bet.
multiply all the bad ones.
Yeah.
And if those birds that were close related had a diary, and they died because they were not strong enough to fight. And after a few years, I realized that the birds that were close related, they either become smaller or they're not fit enough to fight if there's any. I mean,
Infections or anything. Yeah.
anything, they just die because they're not strong enough.
Yeah.
So I try. They don't have to be super birds, but I try to bring in a few birds every year that come from a okay bloodline. And most birds I bring in, they are somehow close related to my birds. But always I try to get birds that are a little bit foreign. Sometimes it works, but as I told you, I try every year to bring something in.
That's good. That's good. So when you pair your birds up, obviously we've spoken about this improvement in the health and the flying of the birds, but do you go on a lot of pedigree for your birds, or do you still look at the visual side of things for your own pairings?
Yeah, that question I'm often asked. I would say 70% of my breeding pairs are love pairs. I keep my birds all together, and when I see a bird with a special cock with a certain hen, I write them down, or nowadays I make a video, and later I can go and say, oh, that bird was when he was a baby, he was with this and this hen, and then I can remember. And I mean, when I pair a normal hen to a cinnamon cock or to an opaline cock, I don't have to check the pedigree. I know it's not the father.
Right.
if the chicks are good, I start looking at the pedigree, and if they're not good, maybe I go the next round for, or maybe normally I make 2 rounds. When I was younger, I was not so patient. Sometimes after the first round, when the chicks were not good, I stopped the pair. And by getting older and wiser, I realized you can have 4 rubbish, disappointing little chicks in the first round. In the next round, you have 2 show winners in the nest from the same pair. And
Yeah.
you have no idea why.
No.
And now I think what's interesting is many times I can show you in the bird room afterwards, not color-wise, but in the feather-wise, many times the bird choose the right partner. I bred an outstanding cinnamon opaline light green cock, and he's now together with a small feathered yellow face albino hen. It doesn't make sense from the color, that combination. But if you see the feather structure, it's a perfect mating. And I certainly will leave them together.
Yeah.
And as long as the bird choose a partner without the same faults, I pair them together. I wouldn't pair a bird with no tail or feather problems together with another bird with feather troubles, because like this you multiply the feather troubles, you fix it.
Yeah.
Or 2
Yeah.
birds with flackies, or 2 birds where the tail is too long, or 2 birds that has not a good position. So I never would multiply the fault. But a few pairs are, you look at them and you say, wow, unbelievable, super, and the chicks are just average. And some pairs you think, not so good, and you see the chicks and they are outstanding. And nowadays I can, well, as I told you, most pairs are love pairs. Or I have a cock and that I like a lot, and I give him 3 hens with similar features, and so he can choose one. Or the other way around, a special hen, I give them 3 cocks, and she can choose one. Like this, they're still love pair, but I give the direction. That's the other way I do a lot. But if I put the cock and the hen that I choose, and they 2 weeks, 10 days of, I don't wait 2 weeks, a few days, and they just sit apart, no interest, I change. And then you can take the same hen, the same color, it's a sister, she looks almost the same, you put them in, and the cock goes crazy, and you have no idea why. But I believe in the birds and love at the first sight. When they like each other, you see that, and if they don't like each other, you waste your time. It's not coming normally.
That's interesting, actually, because yeah, I've got a few love pairs this year, so it'll be quite interesting to see how they go. Okay, so I mean, we've spoken about a lot of the questions. You've answered them as we've gone along, really. So you say about artificial insemination, you're against it, but have you ever had the need to do it at all and think, why did I bother?
You know, I had some years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know, I bred one of the best bird I ever had. It was a light green spangle. And just before he was getting old enough to mate, he, with his ring,
Oh yeah, got it caught.
yeah, and I found him
Yeah.
almost dead. And he survived, but the leg afterwards, he sit like this on the bench and a perch, and he tried to mate, and I heard him in the nest boxes, but I never got a fertile leg. And nowadays, if I would have a bird again with a handicap like this, I couldn't see why I should not do that. I mean, it's if you have a bird in your hand, sometimes they are stressed and they start getting, and then you suddenly have some sperms on the hands. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that can happen. The same with hens. And if you put that on is this now artificial insemination or not? But how shall I say? I have friends that are doing that, and but what I think is even worse than artificial insemination is using foster pairs. I mean, they take always from their good pairs, they take the eggs away and give them to the small ones, and then they feed it. And how shall I say? I think the birds get crazy when you always take the children away or the eggs away.
Yeah.
So also my European show winners, they always feed their own chicks. Maybe I don't let them 5 chicks in the nest. Maybe I just leave them 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Normally I always keep four chicks together. 4 or sometimes 5, but I never leave alone. Sometimes 2. So some hens or some pairs they feed 5 birds easily, and some are struggling with 2 already. But what I want to say is I would not use fosters because, well, of course, I also have certain pairs that I know they feed easily, so I give them youngsters. But I don't I don't take the babies away from my best birds. They feed them themselves.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so our UKBC is an online club, so we don't necessarily have monthly meetings or anything. But what we do is we put out meeting or interviews and things like this. And we're not interested in politics. Our motto is where budgie comes first. So do you think this approach will benefit the hobby in this modern times, rather than trying to get monthly meetings and things every time going online?
Yeah, there were people that told me not to do that because you are concurrence, or is a concurrence the right word? You're in competition with the BS. Generally, I think it's good if I mean, in certain countries there are 5, 6 different bocce clubs, what I think is silly. And from what I saw, I think you are sort of, the BS makes this and you make this, and I don't see it as a competition. I think there's a lot of parts in the BS, and I think you have to focus more on the internet, and I think both is important. I hope that there will be shows again. I think it was boring the last 2 years without any shows, and it was bad for the hobby for sure. And for me, a big important part are the shows. You meet all the people, and you drink a few beers and talk about, and I like that. And just being online, and also I think you can do that, but I think it's much more important to make visits in the real. And I think also I don't really like internet shows, you know.
No.
Also all those pictures on Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, and there's no judge. You just see the head and you don't see the whole bird. And there's no judge that says, hey, that bird has a cyst, you cannot show him. That bird, the tail is too long. That bird is you don't see that, you just see the face. And I think the focus on most bocce breeders is much too much on the face, on the big head. Everyone wants a big head. I was the same, to be honest. Just size. But my old mentor Heinrich Ott, he told me, Daniel, you lost the beauty. Your birds are the biggest I've ever seen, but you lost the beauty. And he was right. And yeah, when I was younger, I thought, well, big is beautiful. And nowadays, I think, no, big can be beautiful, but it's the harmony.
It needs refinement, doesn't it?
That for me, that was a process that took 20, 25 years, longer, that I realized, oh, that's not the way I want to go. And I just realized it's interesting by doing the selection. You can go, you can put your birds into a certain direction. But I made different ways, and I think now I'm on the right track.
Good. So in your country, are you or your clubs and things doing anything for the young generation coming into the hobby, or is it something you're struggling with like we do in this country?
As far as I know, in Western Europe, we're all struggling with the young guys. It's in the Near East, in North Africa, in the Arabic countries, where the hobby is really booming, China as well. Here we have a few people this afternoon. There are two young guys from France coming. They are 23 and 25, I think. That's young. And I'm not sure what they want, but they are young people coming. And I think, well, I remember when I was young, I went to all the big names and they they were not prepared to let me have something useful. And I remember sometimes I asked, what do you feed? What shall I do? And they said, oh no, I don't tell you, that's my secret. So
Yeah.
it's
Whereas now,
I
I
mean,
think,
the new breeders are our future. If nobody comes, and we have, I mean, here in Europe, I think in England it's the same. In 10, 15 years, half of the breeders are dead because, or not in the hobby anymore,
yeah,
because then they are 85, 90 years old. And I think it must be our interest um, to make it attractive for young people as well. That's why I think what you're doing with online, I see our kids, everything is
yeah,
online. They love videos. They love TikTok and things like this. I don't like it at all.
it
I think it's completely boring. But it's a new generation, and I
is.
think if you can offer them a certain part of the hobby online, then why not? I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
good.
good possibility.
Yeah. So obviously, there's a lot in the hobby about feeding birds, and I, for one, have done the same mistakes. I fed everything everybody's told me to, and all in a big pot, and it's just ended in disaster. So can you just run us through your your feeding regime and perhaps how it's changed from, say, 20 years ago?
Well, at the beginning, I had no money at all. The first 10 years, and then with playing football, I got some money and I spent all the money for birds again. And when I had more money, I spent a lot of money for city products, vitamins and booster, anything booster, and this and this. And then he said, "Oh, you must buy this. You have better fertility." I bought it, and but after a certain time, I completely stopped that. I think nowadays my birds, 90% of what they eat is, let's say, 75% is my seed mixture, plus 50% are daily. They get fresh red millet, well, fresh from the ear, and 10% they get soft food or salted oats. That's it.
Yeah.
And they got the whole day. Just a moment, there's somebody at the door. Just a moment.
Okay.
Hello? Yeah, continue. Okay, good. The postman. Always,
Ah,
the postman
yeah.
always rings twice.
Yeah. So
Close the
do
window.
you
Oh,
so do you have lots of things in finger drawers, or do
yes,
you
yes.
just
They're all minerals. I have people always wants to know the name of minerals that I use, but I have about at least 30 different boxes of minerals. When I'm invited to give a talk or to judge a show somewhere, and there's a possibility to buy some budget stuff, and I always buy all the minerals. And don't ask me for the names. I just think,
yeah,
and then I change regularly, and I see certain minerals they like a lot. For example, Hormova from the UK. That's a product I know the
yeah,
name. I feed that since I think 30 years, and that's something they like a lot. But I don't give them. There are certain birds they would eat every day a finger draw when they have babies full of Hormova.
yeah,
But that doesn't make sense. But that's a product they get regularly. But as I told you before, I think good seed mixture and red millet, that's the fundament of my feeding.
Yeah.
And I used to give every day soft food with eggs and vegetables, and I'll stop that. I think it's enough when they get it 2-3 times a week, and 2-3 times a week they get salted oats, they get spinach, they get different salads and herbs. I mix them under the soft food, but I don't give too much quantity of that. When there are certain pairs, they would eat nothing else than soft food, but the droppings become too soft, too
Yes.
wet, and I want to have dry nests and dry droppings, and then the chicks grow better. I
Yeah.
think many people, they make too much for feeding, and they spend too much money for products I'm not sure whether they're really helpful.
No. No.
Vitamins, they make the birds so much aggressive that they start killing the chicks or destroy the
Yeah.
eggs, things like this.
Yeah. Well, one thing that the UKBC are doing is hopefully leading the way with a online course run by our avian vet Kevin Eatwell, and it's all about educating people to how to feed, what to feed, and I like the way he does it. He always questions, why are you adding something? What benefits? So it's not just a case of somebody told me to. We want to know what it was. So we're trying to educate people, even from pet owners right the way through to the shows, all the aviary people. So hopefully, long term, we'll see an improvement in the health of just your standard budgie in a cage, and hopefully, if breeders take this on, they'll be selling healthier babies. So, do you have anything like that in your country where people can go to get education, get information?
A sort like an online seminar, I don't think so.
No, not a regular thing.
No, yeah, some years ago, but I'm talking about 10-15 years. There in Switzerland, there are two budgies club, and they made something for the Hans Ruosch, that was the president of the Ceva club. He still has a few birds, but he's not much active anymore. I remember that he made courses for young people. I never went. I always thought learning by doing is the best. But I mean, I was visiting in my life lots of budgie people, and I always look what they are feeding, and often I can find something. For example, 96, I was visiting Brian Biles, old name in the UK, and
Yeah,
he told me that in the afternoon he switched off the lights from 1:30 to 4 o'clock about. And because the birds, they make a siesta anyway, but if the light goes on again after 2.5 hours, all the hen comes out and mate. And I'm sure because of that, I have better fertility. They mate
yeah,
in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And if you have one mating period more, then you have better
yeah,
fertility.
yeah,
But that's just
yeah.
one of the details. I think when you make budgie visits, you can always learn something. Often you can learn what you should not do,
Yes.
but that's also helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We got to learn by our mistakes sometimes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so my last sort of section was really, I know we've touched on a lot of bits and pieces, but treatments and things, are you a person that regularly treats for unseen problems, really? So you think your birds are healthy, but you're still going to treat for X, Y, and Z, if you see what I mean?
Uh, I was doing that, but I don't do that anymore. In my younger years, I made regularly any kind of antibiotics,
Like
medication,
bake drill and
whole stud. And nowadays, I use probiotics. I don't destroy the bad ones, bad
you
bacteria. I support the good ones,
good ones.
and I'm using in the flights regularly a product called Protexine. It's from V Products.
All
I
right.
come from the UK, and I have oh, I don't know the name. I use lactobacillin to use it. Lactobacillin, they're expensive. So a little bottle is another bottle. Little pack is about, I don't know, 70, 80 euros, and you put a little bit from that under the soft food. And that's what I do regularly. So, and also before I start breeding, I use two products. Don't ask me for the name. It's a red, it's an orange bottle, and it's a green bottle. I got the products from Marcellus Berkeley in Germany. Ask him, he knows the name. And I give them about 1 month before starting up to support their immune system.
Right.
And I'm sure that's helpful.
So it's not necessarily a treatment as such. It's a booster for health.
Yeah, but it's not an antibiotic, it's a probiotic.
Yes.
As I
Yeah.
told you, you don't destroy anything. I think I was once in a talk where a famous breeder was telling how many different antibiotics he's using every year. I won't tell you the name, but I was shocked.
Yeah.
That,
I bet.
you do that, and you do that, and I said, oh. For me, it's completely the wrong way. It's if a bird is sick, I have antibiotic. I have the Combivix from Dr. Schröder at home. I have Baytril at home. I have tetracycline. And if a bird is sick, most of the time I try tetracycline. And yeah, if that doesn't, 90% it's helpful, then that tetracycline.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't help, you try something else. But to make a treatment with the whole stud, I think it's not.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a problem, maybe you have to do that.
Yeah.
But I think if you have a problem and to just try any antibiotics, what most people do, can be very dangerous. You
Yeah.
have to make dropping tests and get the analysis from a vet. And then he says, okay, you have to do that, then do it. But just to think maybe try that or try that can be very dangerous.
Yeah. Right. Well, we've covered all of my sort of questions from the members and everything. So I think we'll leave it there. And it's been great to talk to you.
There was a few questions that I marked that we did not talk about.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think there are a few. That one is one of them. What's the importance of prepotent birds by its hens or cocks, and does it make a difference for a hen or a cock? In my experience, in general, the quality from the cock goes up to his daughters, and the quality from the hens goes up to the cocks. You know, it's cross.
Right.
I think that's so big cocks rather produce big hens, and big hens rather produce big cocks, to say it simply. It's not always like this. It's not 100% rule, but in general, I think that's it works.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And if you can make a quick stop, I got 2 sheets of paper, and on that one I didn't mark anything, but there was another paper, I don't know where it is.
That's okay. I mean, I've marked most of them off as we've gone through. So
let me or make, well, you can leave it on, but let me quickly, I don't know where I put it, somewhere. Let me go quickly through the question where I thought that's an interesting question. Yeah, about the balance of the birds. I already told you. But I always kept the ideal bird in my mind, and if you have a bird with some good features and some are missing, I try to put the missings into the pairing, and visually wise, I make much more visual pairings than from the genetic. But you know, all the birds, as long as they have a good genetic background, I think that's the most important thing. You can pair anything up and the quality comes out again. And when I was young, in the books was written, it's easy to get to the top, but it's difficult to stay at the top. I think it's exactly the other way around. I think it's hard to get to the top, but when you have a good stud of birds, well, of course, I keep the better ones for myself, but I really breed also with lesser birds. And if you breed also two average birds together, as long as they have the right pedigree, they can reproduce absolutely top quality. And it's logical, it's mathematic. And I mean, I was teaching mathematics at school, and I still like to see rules that they really work. And breeding budgie has to do a lot with logical things. It works. And for example, with crests, I stopped with crests because there's no systematic in it. It's I admire people that are not losing the faith by breeding them, but I couldn't see a system in it, and they just anything
very
happens.
random, very random.
Yeah, very random, exactly. And I don't like that. With other birds, it doesn't work 100%, but you always see it's a system behind. And yeah, so wait, give me 10 seconds, not 10 seconds, 1 minute I need more light to check the questions that I thought they interested.
Yeah, because I know some of them you sort of answered in a roundabout way as we went through, so I didn't ask some of them for a second time, really.
Well, I just read and give you a quick answer, okay?
No problem.
Birds that you bring in, yes, always makes sense. But in generally, I wouldn't bring a bird in from a start where I see there are sick birds. It's a no-go. When I bring in the birds, as I told you, when I go for an outcross, it must come. It doesn't have to be a super bird, but it must come from a bird where a lot of good birds are there, and the stud must be clean and healthy. And then I keep them, I don't make 1 month separate, but I keep them a certain time separately until I see, okay, they're fine. So I think quarantine is for sure helpful. French mold.
Oh yes.
That's I think that's a question that I'm more. We were already talking quickly about. I think French mold is probably the biggest problem in our hobby, and I remember some years ago I had a group of people from Netherlands here, and we were talking about French mold, and they all said we don't have French mold. Later we went to a restaurant, and after a few beers, people started to talk more often about how it really is. And at the end, it was everybody had French mold. Some had more, some had less. And what is French mold? French mold is a virus, 100%. For me, that's clear. And there's no reason to kill those birds. I breed with them, and I cannot see, I understand how it really works, but I think it's a question of the immune system. As long as the birds are strong enough to fight against any illness, you won't get the problem, but certain birds are not strong enough. And you can pair 2 French mold birds together, and all the youngsters are perfect. And you can pair 2 normal birds together, and all the youngsters are French mold. And it's not easy to do it. And as I told at the beginning, if you mix too much birds from too many foreign places, then you get in trouble. That's I think I
always look at it like when we send the children back to school after a long holiday, there's all those new bugs coming into one place, and they all get mixed up, and they all get colds. And it's very much similar that, I did when I had French mold. I bought in from 3 or 4 different places. So, I had French mold.
You don't blame the people where you got the bird from. They can have no French mold at all. And you bring the bird in and he breeds only French mold. You should actually, I don't do it, but you should, when you bring in the bird, leave him a few months before you use him.
Yeah.
You can do that when you buy a very young bird, but it's difficult to get very young birds. When you buy an old bird, a 4 years old cock, and yeah, you don't wait half a year. Maybe he's dead.
No, that's right. That is the problem. I think people are so keen to get them paired up, aren't they? You know.
But to avoid French mold, it would be the correct way to wait a
That's
few
right.
months. And if you have French mold, that I wanted to say, there's nothing else than to stop. It won't get better. It
Yep.
just
No.
get worse. And I think French mold is also somehow linked to temperature, too much temperature, and mainly it's linked to not enough oxygen, not enough good fresh air. I realized in my new bird room, where we are now since 6 years, I started to close the windows when it's getting colder,
Yeah.
below zero and so on. And then I got the problems. And nowadays I don't close the windows anymore. And I leave it, I leave the windows open
Yeah.
to get fresh air, but it's rather cold, even if you have a floor heating. But that doesn't affect the birds. I think the clean air is probably the most important thing, or the worst thing if you get French mold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you use incomplete birds for breeding? Yes, I do. I also I also use flagged birds, but again, don't multiply them. And I think if I have a cock with no tail and I breed with him and the chicks have no tail as well, I stop immediately.
Yep.
Well, I don't have that anymore, really not. But the same when I have a cock that all the youngsters are always flagged, I give him away. But if I have a breeding pair and they have 15 youngsters, if after 3 rounds, and the 2 best ones have no tail, all the other ones are complete. Yeah, I rather use them. Maybe if the number 3 and 4 are similar in quality, just a little bit behind, I keep the ones that are complete. But there's nothing wrong to work with those. But again, if they if they bring on the thought, I would stop with them.
Yeah.
But any thought, you can work with it. I think it's useful to have flagged birds. Flagged birds are somehow linked with bigger spots.
Yeah.
Let me see. That's also a question that in your opinion, how important is it for you to have birds with different feather textures in your stud? Very important. I mean, breeding budgie is like playing a jigsaw puzzle, putting the different elements together. And if all your birds look the same, and when I have again, you make 3 rounds, you got 16 youngsters from a pair. You see some look similar and some look completely different, but that's nothing bad. That's nothing normal. And as I said, you have to be able to put the different features together, always with the idea to get the perfect, beautiful, stylish bird. But I think, well, I don't know any stud where you don't have different features. It's normal. And yeah, you see my birds, they're very big ones, they're very small ones, but most of them are somewhere in between. But you need, I think you need to have different features. Also, yeah, again, if you have clean spangles with no markings, you need to have birds with too much melanin. So these are flagged birds. So like this, you can balance the thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to look at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm getting visitors. I have to eat with the family.
Yeah,
And
no, that's what I was going to say. The same, actually.
if you want to see some of my birds, we have to stop and go in the breeding
No,
room.
I think what I might do is, if you're okay, not straight away, but we may do a part two in a few months' time or something when it's convenient, and we'll bring together perhaps some of your birds, and we'll have a look round your bird room and do a second part maybe.
We can do now a little bit. Afterwards I stopped breeding for several months.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, my intention was just to sit and chat and find out more about you. And then we'll perhaps do a second part with your birds, which will be another video for us to use on our website, if that's all right with you.
You cannot make the recording of from the
Well, that's what I'll find out. I'll find out how we do that, and we can do it that way round. So that'll be quite good. But the only thing I was going to add was what we'd like to do as a thank you for you is to make you a member of UKBC for a year, and give you the opportunity just to see what we're doing, and maybe access some of the information we've got, and maybe you might have some ideas to put forward for us that we could use. So if that's acceptable with you, somebody will contact you with the details.
Sure.
And we'll make you up a member. So, but I think it's been really good. It's been nice to just sit and listen to you, the person, rather than, barraging lots of individual questions. I think, you speak very honestly, which is sometimes missing in this hobby. Like you said, it took a few drinks to get out that everybody's got French malt. So, and those are the sort of things.
I also have French mold. I also have
Yeah.
birds with cysts. I have birds with infected eyes. I also have all those problems. That if people say they don't have it, well, I think they don't tell you the truth.
No,
we're all
it.
struggling with it, and they think it doesn't make sense to hide the problem. And
No.
what I want to say as a proportion, I wrote already a few years ago an article about an idea I had to make serious research on French mold. I think that's really a big issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, if every owner, I get, let's say, 800 rings a bird. So if I pay for every ring, I say something, 50 cents or 20 cents, whatever. But we do that from the whole world, and there is a lot of money coming together, and we give that money to a university or any other institution that makes serious research on French mold. I think that would be a very good idea.
Yeah.
And what's also I forgot to say before is an interesting aspect is that the fact that in Australia, I've been twice to Australia, and I was going out with some budgie friends there, but I haven't seen one single budgie. I've seen a lot of other parrots, but they told me that when they were younger, they went up to the trees and they opened the nests and they saw French mold birds in there.
Yeah.
And that was for me amazing. I didn't know that. And I also didn't know that other birds can have it too. But in nature, it's just once they come out of the nest, they fall down, and a few minutes later,
that's right,
eat them, and the problem is solved, and the healthy ones, they fly further. We cannot do that, but it's nobody knows exactly what it is, where does it come from, and how you can treat it. Up to now, there's no treatment. And if you would make some serious research on that subject, that would be helpful.
I think Kevin, our avian vet, I think he's going to be looking at some of that as well. But I think it comes down to funding and people taking part. So, but no, well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you on behalf of the UKBC. And like I say, we'll give it a few months, and then perhaps we'll join up again and do a bird room walk and have a look at the world of budgies from your eyes. So
good.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.